have pets when you were a kid?
Yeah, my first little dog was at my grandpa's, and his name was Mups.
Mups.
I have a beautiful color picture of myself with Mups. I don't know, he was an odd dog. He had kind of strange front legs. He was a mixed breed. He had long hair, but real short, funny little front legs. And but I have a picture with Mups. It's one of my favorite pictures. Yeah.
What did you do with Mops when he was?
Oh, I don't know. What do you do with dogs?
Did he chase after you? Did he?
Yeah, I'm sure we ran around. I don't, I was 3-4 years old.
Oh.
My biggest memory when we lived there was when I had to have an appendectomy. I was 3 years old, and I remember being in the hospital. And I guess I was there 9 days. and I remember when I first came home, Mom wanted me to be kind of quiet in the crib. Yeah. But that's one of my early memories. Besides the tornado and going in the cave.
Yeah.
But I had a tire swing out in front of the house. It was just a tire that they tied to a tree, and that was my swing. I remember that.
When you were little, either at any of the three places, did you have a favorite toy?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I had a little tiny toy piano that I thought was pretty neat, and Irma Dieterding always called it how did she say that? Panano or panana or something, I don't know. But she would tease me about my piano away from home once. Otto was there, and he was out with Dad doing something. And I wanted to go home. I wanted to go to Grandma's. And so, I'd lived there for 3-4 years, and here we moved, and I wanted to go back to Grandma's. So I crawled in the car, in the back seat, and I thought, nope, he'll see me here. So I laid down on the floor in the back seat, and he got in the car, and we drove home. And I didn't like garages either. And when he went to drive in the garage, I stood up and said, "Don't drive in the garage." I scared him to death. So about that time, Mom missed me. And she's out looking. She looked in the horse tank, everywhere. Couldn't find me. So she gets on the phone to call Grandma. In the meantime, Otto's taken me in the house, and Grandma's on the phone trying to call Mom, and they couldn't get through to each other. And don't ask me what happened to me afterward, because I don't remember. I have wiped that out. I do remember doing it, though, getting in that car and making that conscious thought, I've got to lay down on the floor. That I remember.
Wow.
Horrible little kid. Then one time there was some mud. We had a garage there where we lived in the big white house, and it had a cement body. And I took a bunch of mud and drew a big, what looked like a smiley face, on the side of the wall. I took crayons upstairs. There were wood floors, and I drew tracks for cars and stuff all over the wood floors. And we had Aladdin lamps, they had a kind of a mesh inside that would get real bright and hot, and they had a glass mantle. And one day I decided to find out what happened if you took a wet piece of paper and put it on the glass mantle. I remember that one. Mom was not happy at all.
And what happened?
It exploded in pieces.
Has your life turned out differently than you thought it would when you were a girl or a teenager?
I didn't think I'd ever wind up on a farm.
What did you think you were going to do, or what did you
don't
hope
know.
to do?
Well, one time when I was a very young girl, I thought I wanted to be a airline hostess or stewardess, whatever they call them now. But then I read somewhere that you had to be taller than 5'2" in order to qualify, so I gave up on that. That was just one of those things that young kids do, Or I remember one time we were all supposed to go out and pick milkweed pods. They wanted the silks out of the milkweed pods. And I fantasized that they made parachutes out of them. Well, I found out later, no, they didn't do that, but they used them as stuffing in vests and stuff.
Oh.
I guess. I don't know. That was one of our excursions. And then we were supposed to buy savings stamps. And when you filled a book, you know, why then I don't know how many books it took to get us little savings bond, but all of these things. And then stuff was rationed, food and stuff was rationed. You couldn't get sugar and I don't know what else, because, you know, I was still pretty young at that time, but the poor ladies trying to cook without a lot of the food stuff. We used honey a lot. Evidently you could still get honey, and maybe some of it was local, I don't know. But we used honey like on our cereal, or they even used it in recipes, I think, to some degree. I know that ladies couldn't buy silk stockings, and I remember reading that they would paint a line on the back of their leg because it looked like a seam. My cousin Wes was drafted when he was 18 and went over to Germany pretty quickly. And I don't remember that happening. The first memory I have was the day that the pastor came over, and I'm going to cry. Pastor came over to church to get Marilyn to take her home because Wes had been wounded. He had the back of his head shot off. And, I mean, he recovered and he lived. But, you know, when we're little kids, that's hard. Marilyn was 2 grades ahead of me, just 2 years older. And Wes's folks called Pastor Beckler, and he came over and got Marilyn out of school.
You mentioned that you guys felt or heard the explosion at the Navy plant.
Yeah, we did. Both, I think, a little bit. Yeah,
Okay.
we did.
Can you remember anything about that?
No,
Okay.
I don't. I don't remember much about, except that we did know something had
How
happened.
far away was that from where you were?
Well, about 20 miles, 15, 20 miles. That was a big one. Killed I don't know how many people. Well, it would have been more than 20 because it was another 5 miles east of town, east of Hastings at least. 5, 10.
I'm not sure exactly
Yeah,
where
I don't
that
know.
was on the
I
base.
don't know where it
Yeah.
was either, but they had this huge Navy ammunition depot there east of Hastings. And years later, I'm going to digress again,
Please.
we heard a speaker tell about a lot of things about it. And they give tours out there every so often. I never did take the tour, and I should have. But one thing he mentioned that really impressed me was that on Hitler's hit list, our NAD was number 5.
Wow.
Yeah. So, of course, we were in the middle of the country, so it was a little hard to get there before somebody else shot him down. But that was on Hitler's hit list. Had a bomb drill one day, if you can imagine having a bomb drill out in the middle of
Well,
But 2 of the girls ran and hid behind the outhouse. I don't remember what the teacher said, but he said, that's no place to hide if you're going to have a bomb.
where were you supposed to hide up there?
I think go out and lay in the ditches or something. Get away from the building anyway, and the outhouse. But they thought they were pretty safe hiding back there. Mom was in the hospital having Roger. I was born at home. The doctor came out to Grandma's. I was born at home. But Roger was born in the hospital. I guess Mom decided that was enough of that. And while Mom was in the hospital, and I was staying with Grandma, my dad got up one morning and there was no car there. Our car was stolen. It took a while for him to trace it out, but some guy left Ingleside, walked out to our place, stole the car, drove it down south of Holstein somewhere, and evidently ran out of gas and lived in it for quite a while before they found it.
It's not like there weren't any other places between Ingleside and your place for him to stop and steal a car.
Well, don't ask me why.
Okay.
It happened. Yeah.
So did that impact your grandmother bringing your brother home from the hospital, or
My mother, you mean?
yeah, I mean, yeah.
I don't know. I am sure she stayed that same amount of time, no
I
matter
mean, if
what.
your car was
Well,
gone up,
Otto. Dad took Otto's
Oh.
car.
you had a
Yeah,
way.
he used Otto's car. Otto had a car. My uncle Otto. So yeah, but and I don't know how many days it was. It probably was only a day or two before they found the car. But that was kind of a strange incident, really.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So they found the car. Did they find the guy who?
yeah, I don't remember that. I don't remember if the guy was still living in it or not. But they could tell, he'd had a fire, he'd been cooking and different things, and he'd been living in it. So
Okay.
I'm going to go back to the 8th grade
Yeah.
exams, and this is going to sound like bragging.
Brag away.
But Audrey worked me so hard to catch up. And this was county-wide exams, except for the Hastings schools. The Hastings schools didn't participate, but it was like Holstein, Roseland, County. And I came in second in the county. So, she caught me up all right.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Did you ever have chores that you had to do?
Chores?
Mm-hmm.
Not at that point, no.
How about any time as a child?
Later?
Mhm.
Yeah, I had to carry in cobs. Now explain that to people.
Go ahead. Why did you have to carry in corn cobs?
Because they used it for fuel in the stove, in the kitchen stove at least. And yeah, back then the corn pickers just picked. Well, the men picked the corn. You go way back. They picked it by hand, and then later it was shelled with a sheller, and you had the cobs left. And so they piled them all up, and then through the winter burned them for fuel.
So at this point, you didn't have any electricity in your house.
Not when I was carrying in cobs, no. At my grandma and grandpa's, we did have electricity, yeah. I didn't carry in cobs when I was 3-4 years old. I didn't have any chores then.
You mentioned your grandparents had not only electricity but running water.
Mm-hmm.
Did you, or how? At what point did you have running water at either of the other places, or did you always?
No, we didn't have it until we got electricity in '48. It was almost impossible to have water pressure, any way of forming water pressure to have running water without electricity, to run a motor or whatever it took to have pressure
So
built.
then, what was the process for taking a bath without electricity?
Only on Saturday nights. I don't really remember a lot. I do remember that Av's parents had some kind of a rubber tub that folded up like a tent almost, and open it up, and there was this rubber that you could put water in. I thought that was great, but we didn't have that, and we had like the old boiler metal tin. I don't know. I honestly do not remember exactly how we did the bathing. Grandma and Grandpa Shuckeye, when I lived there, had a tub. So
And then they boiled the water to.
they must have
Bring it over
heated
and-
the water on the stove because they didn't have a hot water heater. They had running water, but no hot water heater. We had a stool, we had a sink there, but
So
what-
if you had a sink, then was there water pressure to run water in the sink, or did you have to go outside?
no, there
the
was
water.
pressure to
There
run.
was
There were
pressure.
faucets and pressure there.
Okay.
Yeah. When they put that in, I don't know. I'm not sure. But as far back as I can remember, it was there. So, and I never thought to ask my dad, when did they do that? I never thought to ask him those things. It was there,
Yeah.
as far back as I could remember. So why ask? Or why say, why didn't we have it in the next house? Why did we have it there? I didn't ask.
You had mentioned earlier that you lived in places that had electricity, and then you moved to a place that didn't have electricity. How about that transition? When
I was too young to really notice that.
Okay.
I don't have too many memories of that being a problem for me. I'm sure it was for Mom a little bit, but I think Mom was just so happy to have a home of her own and not be living with all the in-laws that she would have taken anything. We all had big console radios then. Everybody did. Before we had electricity, we had a big console radio that worked on batteries.
And you sat around and watched the radio?
Mm-hmm.
Like what shows? What were your favorite shows on the radio?
What was that Saturday morning show? Oh yeah, now I'm not going to remember. Well, we listened to Fibber McGee and Molly, and The Shadow Knows, but the Saturday morning was kind of like little plays, and I loved that, but I can't think what it was called. I don't know.
Is it a kid's show?
Not necessarily. It was just some, no.
When you went to town, while we're in town,
Mm-hmm.
Where did you like to go besides the theater? Did you have shops, stores that you like to go to?
Not as a kid, but when we got a little older, teenagers, Joanne and I went to Woolworth's lunch counter and had sodas while we were in town when we were teenagers. But no, not when I was young. I went wherever Mom went, I suppose.
Can you recall what the first movie was that you ever went to a movie theater for?
Oh, no. No, I remember one time, and I remember what that movie was. The folks would go to town, Hastings once in a while, to shop, and Mom would drop me off at the theater, buy my ticket, and let me go in. And she'd say, okay, when this is done, you come out and I'll pick you up. Well, I came in the middle of a movie, so I watched to the end, and then it started at the beginning, and I got back to the middle, and I got to watch this through again, Mm-hmm. And she finally had to come in and get me. But I was pretty young at the time. But that movie I remember because it was the Sullivans. The story about the Sullivan brothers that all enlisted in the Second World War. Mm-hmm. And they all wound up on the same ship, and they all died at the same time. Mm-hmm. And after that, the military would no longer allow brothers, or at least that many, to be stationed together like that. So that movie I remember. I'm not sure about any other early ones that I saw.
Did you have a certain type of movie that you liked?
Whatever I could get to.
Okay.
And do you remember what it cost?
No, that I don't remember.
How about we talked about going to the movies.
Uh-huh.
Was there a movie back then that every time Turner runs it, you got to make sure you still watch it after all the years?
There's a lot of them.
Okay.
Any Bing Crosby show, any, Doris Day, but that came a little later. I'm trying to think now who else. They're Cary Grant, yeah.
What was your favorite book when
Book?
you were young? Yeah.
Oh, there were so many of them, but probably Little Women.
Why?
I love Joe. I always said I was going to have a little girl named Joe. And when you were born, I hadn't picked Joe as a girl's name because I couldn't come up with a name. I didn't like Josephine.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to name her Joanne because I had my friend Joanne. I couldn't come up with a name that would shorten to Joe. And then after you were born, when I was pregnant with her, some people we knew in Kennesaw had a Jody. And I thought, there's my Joe.
We were musical.
As a family.
As a family.
Yeah.
We're musical. We're musicians.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And I know Dad was. Were his parents, or did...
I don't know about his parents. Mine were... They didn't play instruments that much. I think Dad played the sax a little bit, and Mom wanted to play piano. They couldn't afford to get her lessons, but they sang. They both sang beautifully. They were in the choir all the time. And, yeah. What was the original question?
We're a musical family.
Yeah, kind of.
Were your brother and sister musical?
Val was. She always has been, yeah. Yeah. Raj, he's musical in respect to loving to work with recordings, and he knows every artist and everything about him. He's not personally, he doesn't think he can sing or do anything like that. But yeah, he's very knowledgeable about music.
He would have been our manager.
But I started giving you piano lessons because I felt you needed better coordination. You couldn't tie your shoestring.
Still can't.
And yeah, I thought, well, maybe the finger, would help you learn. Well, when you started school, and I said it to the kindergarten teacher a little later, I said, well, he can't even tie his own shoestring. She says, well, let me teach him something. That's what she said. So, but you still, at the end of the year, I don't think you can still tie your shoestrings.
I don't think so.
But I started you in piano fairly young with Mrs. Hall. Do you remember taking from
yep.
Mrs. Hall? Yeah.
What stories do you have of your wedding?
They had to hide the beer in a tank in the barn because my grandpa Marchin didn't believe in drinking. So that's not a story about the wedding. It was a hot day. I remember that, and there were a lot of things that kind of went wrong. And my mom baked the wedding cake. She did decorated wedding cakes then, and we had these 2 mirrors that hung in the dining room, I think, big round mirrors, and that was what she always put her tiered cakes on as the platform. And we had our reception out in the Quonset because it was a brand new building, never been used. Church didn't have a basement. We didn't know where to go for a reception. And Dad said, why not use the Quonset? So we did. Anyway, she's starting to carry the cake out to the Quonset. Crack goes the mirror. Somebody ran back in and got the second mirror and slid it underneath, and they got it out to the Quonset. I remember that.
You had a pretty good-sized wedding party. Did you have a lot of people at the wedding?
I honestly am not sure how many. I'm sure it's recorded somewhere, but it was mostly just relatives that we invited, a few good friends, but mostly relatives. Yeah, aunts and uncles, and yeah, there were quite a few.
And he was in the Army by that time.
Yes, he was.
What did you do to fill the day as we were growing up?
Sewed. I don't know what a woman usually does. Took care of kids, ironed, washed, cooked.
You weren't involved in the farm work?
No. No, not really. I was kind of a gopher once in a while. Take us here, take us there, whatever. And then I drove pickup when we laid out pipe after you kids were gone. But other than that, no, nothing to speak of.
All right.
Cooked for extra people sometimes.
What's the dumbest thing either one of you ever did? You can confess yourself, or what's the one thing you spent the rest of his life coming back to Dad and saying, boy, don't ever do anything that stupid again.
No, I never did that.
Okay.
But the funniest thing, if you want the funniest
Good.
thing,
Even better.
we were living in that little white house, and I wake up in the middle of the night, and he's gotten up, and he's standing by the dresser with a drawer open. He was a sleepwalker. And I said to him, what are you doing? He says, well, I've got to go to the bathroom. So that was one of the funniest things. He hadn't gone, but he was ready.
For somebody who may not have, if this gets done and gets passed down, and somebody who didn't know either of you or didn't know you well, how would you like to be remembered? What would you want people to know about you?
That I smiled. And I guess a little bit that, I was fairly intelligent. I did, in high school, we had, what did they call those? We went to Kearney, to the teachers' college, to take tests and a lot of interscholastic, yeah. And now I have to stop and think what I actually did. But in English, I know I came in 10th, and that was kids all over the state. In algebra, I came in 4th. In geometry, I came in either 4th or 5th. And this sounds like bragging, I know, but those were my favorite subjects. I entered in typing, I flunked it completely.
He's not here to speak for himself. What should they know about Dad?
He was a very patient, loving person, very caring, very giving.